Welcome to the Viewless Wings Poetry Podcast, where we celebrate the craft of poetry. Each week, we feature interviews with incredible poets and artists, including Olivia Gatwood and A.E. Stallings, and original poetry read by the authors. I'm your host, James Morehead, Poet Laureate of Dublin, California, and author of Canvas and Portraits of Red and Gray. Chapter 3, Publishing Your First Book. On this episode of the Viewless Wings Poetry Podcast, I'm going to start a series of episodes on the journey I took to self-publish my first book, Canvas. I had so many questions to research that it was overwhelming at first. Hopefully this series helps you make your journey a bit easier. I've written poetry for over 40 years, inspired by my grade 10 creative writing teacher so many years ago. Poetry captured my imagination, a form of artistic expression that is all about economy, beauty, and the search for perfection through the careful selection and thoughtful placement of words. For many years, I published poetry to a website, but had always been frustrated by the trade-offs of publishing to the web, in particular, the inability to control the visual design and layout. I also wanted my poetry to outlive me. The web is ephemeral. When I'm gone, there is no guarantee my website will live on. A pandemic-induced spurt of poetic productivity convinced me to finally take the leap and publish my first book. There is no book without a polished manuscript, and with so many elements that make up a book, it's tempting to get ahead of the manuscript and start thinking about all of the other details. The best advice I received early on was to focus on the manuscript before worrying about anything else. Publishing a high-quality book is a lengthy process, and much of that process relies on a completed manuscript. With a 40-year catalog to choose from, the first thing I did was print out a subset of poems and filled my family room floor with paper. While the poems weren't written with a published book in mind, I was able to find themes and a way to arrange the poems to create a narrative. Even though your book will ultimately be edited using digital tools, it's very helpful to manipulate paper during the process. Getting from a draft manuscript to a fully edited and copy-edited manuscript will be covered in a future article. Publishing a book is intimidating. Imposter syndrome is inevitable, and there are so many options, so many websites promising publishing riches, so many books on the business of creating books. For my first book, self-publishing made the most sense. A traditional publisher of poetry would take a lot longer, even years longer, and because all of my poetry had previously been published on my website, building a portfolio of placements in poetry journals and magazines wasn't an option. I looked at vanity publishers, but wanted to control the imprint associated with the book. Self-publishing for my debut book was the best option for me. I started this project with no idea what to expect. I assumed I'd be ordering box loads of book inventory and using my garage as a distribution center. Because of print-on-demand services like Kindle Direct Publishing and Ingram Spark, my key assumption was wrong. The upfront printing costs are limited to advanced copies and proofs. There are many other costs to turn a manuscript into a print-ready book. How much you need to budget depends on what you are prepared to do yourself and the level of polish. In my case, I wanted my book to be a piece of art, as professional as a traditionally published book. You could do all of that for under $5,000. Below are some of the key costs, which will be covered in more detail in future episodes. Cover art and design, book interior design and ebook conversion, capturing a portrait photo, editing versus copy editing, ISBNs and the Library of Congress control number, self-publishing consulting options, proofs, advanced reading copies, and giveaway copies, and promoting and marketing strategies for your book. In this first season of the Viewless Wings Poetry Podcast. In addition to poetry readings and interviews, I'll be covering every aspect of self-publishing in a series of episodes. Subscribe and you won't miss an update. Thank you for spending a few moments with me. You can Google James Morehead Canvas to find my book and learn more about my poetry. The Viewless Wings Poetry Podcast is written and produced by James Morehead. You can follow me on Twitter at Dublin Ranch, subscribe to the Viewless Wings Poetry Podcast, and follow us on viewlesswings.com or on Instagram at Viewless Wings.